Hello there guys, and welcome back to MN's LEGO channel, and today I'm going to be showing you guys a few tips for how to get clone troopers for cheap and build a clone army. So all of these tips that I'm going to be telling you guys are tips that I've implemented myself and getting most of these clone troopers, and I bought the vast majority of these guys using these techniques. In fact, all but 6 of these guys I've gotten the past 3 or 4 months on a budget. So yeah, it is possible to build a clone army in these days, but you have to have a little bit of know-how, which I'll be getting right now with the first tip. So the first tip I have for getting clones for cheap is parting out clone troopers. So essentially what this means is finding a particular clone trooper you want and then searching for their parts on Bricklink and then just buying them that way. So let's take this guy for example. He has 4 different parts, 5 if you count the blaster, which can all be acquired pretty easily with the exception of a couple. I'll break this down and show you. So here's this guy now that he's disassembled. So there are 5 parts to him: his legs, his torso, his head, his helmet, and then his blaster. These 2 parts are really easy to come by. You can usually find them for like 25 cents or so, probably less on most Bricklink stores, especially in used condition. And the head piece, you don't necessarily need this Clone Wars head. You can just get a blank head, a plain black head or something, or angry clone face, or something that's a little easier to come by than this, or just whatever's essentially cheapest and looks the best. A plain black head is typically fine, especially if you don't care about how they look under the helmet. So these 2 parts are the hardest parts to come by, and especially the helmet. Now the helmet and this, they go for about $1, maybe $2 a piece, maybe even $3 if you're looking at like new parts. And if you take the arms off this guy, it's a little bit cheaper, and then just supply the arms yourself. And yeah, so another tip I have kind of in this same vein of things is get as many of like the helmet and torso of a particular clone trooper as you can, and just collect as many of them as you possibly can, and then get all the rest of these parts at a later date and build the physical figures as you get parts for them, and you'll grow your army that way without paying too much money. Kind of an addition to this is sacrificing detail for price. So let's take a couple of troopers here. Here we have 2 ETH Koth troopers, both of which I've got very recently. This is the full figure, and this one is one I parted out myself. So you'll notice a couple of differences, namely that the one I parted out myself has this Stormtrooper head from back into like 2012-2013, and it has plain, unmarked, unprinted legs, whereas this guy has printed legs and he has the standard Clone Wars clone face. So this is a perfect example of sacrificing detail for cheap price. Just get this cheapest head you can possibly find, as well as really cheap legs, and the rest of it, as long as you get a good torso and a good helmet, for most clone troopers that's really all you need. Especially if they're like these Clone Wars clone troopers, because the classic Clone Wars clone trooper, he didn't have printing on his legs or arms either, so if the clone trooper did have arm printing or leg printing, you can do without it, just get plain legs instead. It'll save you a lot of money, especially if you part out these guys. And yeah, you can get a lot of them much more cheaply for this way. So my next tip for getting clone troopers for cheap is make your own custom designs using parts that you have from your own collection, as well as stuff you get on Bricklink. So the goal for this is to look at what you have, think about the cheapest amount of money that you can spend to get the bare minimum amount of parts to make essentially a functional clone trooper. Take this guy here, or actually this guy's even a better example. This guy, I literally only bought the torso for him. I already had the Scout Trooper helmet, this headpiece, as well as these legs and the blaster, so the torso is all I bought. And you might not necessarily have a Scout Trooper helmet, but if you have any Clone Trooper helmets or something like that, or maybe a Snow Trooper helmet that's a Galactic Marine potentially, or one of these guys in green is the 41st Elite Corps Trooper, or something like that. And yeah, you can build an army really cheaply for this way, especially if you have lots of these legs. And if you can have lots of these legs, that'll save you a lot of money in the long run, especially for parting guys out. An example of a fancier version of that is this. So the torso and legs I already happen to have, The legs I already happen to have, as well as the arms, blasters, and the jetpack. The pauldrons are custom made. The angry clone face I had for myself, as well as the antenna. So all I had to buy is the torso and helmet. this is what you'll have to do. This is your goal with parting out clone troopers, to get everything except the torso and helmet, and then get those for the cheapest price possible. This takes it to a new extreme. I paid probably less than $1 for additional parts for this guy, and he looks great. He's passable as a Phase 1 clone commander, even though he's a bomb squad helmet, but that's besides the point. And yeah, he's still passable. He may not be the best looking clone trooper ever, but he's still passable. So the next tip I have is actually more important than you might think. It's not being picky about what you get. So when you first start collecting clone troopers and you see armies of hundreds upon hundreds of these guys, or maybe dozens of these guys, you're definitely going to want, at first you're going to be personally wanting to get lots and lots of these guys. That's not a bad thing, but you're not going to get very far that way, especially if you're on a very tight budget like me. So actually, the first clone troopers I got, back when I first started collecting clone troopers again, were actually these two right here. And these are most certainly not this. So yeah, you'll end up having a more diverse army this way, which can be a good or bad thing. And especially if you get some of these older clone troopers. I have a good mix of older and newer ones. This may or may not be acceptable depending on your taste, but yeah, just even if you do get a good mix, like practically every single one of your clone troopers is unique, that's fine at first, because eventually the more and more you collect, the more ones of the same type you'll buy, to the point where you eventually are going to start to get sizable collections of each particular type of minifigure. It also helps that these are both really nice figures. Like in my case, these were figures that I wasn't too bad with having anyways. Just make sure that you're okay with getting the figure, even if it's not what you really, really wanted. Eventually a good deal's gonna come, like what happened with me for these guys. Like, I just had a good deal I couldn't pass up, so I ended up getting them. You have to wait for stuff like that. So tip 4 is using parts from your own collection when parting out. So I've touched on this before, especially like in the very beginning, but if you can supply these legs, you can put these on any clone trooper torso and helmet and it looks fine, with the exception of maybe this guy, but this guy's always been a black sheep, so to speak. Like, even with this guy, if you wanted to, you could put these legs on him. He looks a little bit awkward, but it still is passable as a clone trooper. So yeah, for most clone troopers though, like take this guy, he has printed legs, you can just take those off, put plain legs on, and there, that's a very perfectly passable airborne clone trooper. Or another example would be this 332nd trooper. Take those legs off, put these on, and again, a passable 332nd trooper. So another thing you can do is swap out, instead of getting torsos with arm printing, which is very rare for clone troopers, you can just get torsos without arms at all, and then just get white arms and black hands for your figure. This works especially well if you have lots of stormtroopers or something, because you can just take their arms off. I've mutilated a lot of my stormtroopers to get arms for clone troopers. Trust me, it's worth it if you care about building a clone army. So my next tip is get cheap variants of a figure. So take this Commander Gree for example. This is his most recent variant, but he has another variant from like 2014 and 2016 that is about half the price of this. So for certain cases like that, there's not too many of them, but especially for named characters, if you can get a cheaper variant that may have maybe a little less detail, or maybe different accessories in the case of old Phase 1 Captain Rex, or something like that, just an older variant of a particular clone trooper, is sometimes, it is usually a lot cheaper, especially if you get one with a little less detail. And yeah, just the older variants, they have a little less detail, but they still look just as good in an army. And if you can get a lot of them, and if you can get a lot of those guys, you'll still build a good army. And this is another example of a guy with an older variant. This is the older variant of this original clone trooper, 2005 and 2007. One of these came out in 2010 with a little more detail on the mouth, but it's much more expensive than getting one of these. So yeah, stuff like that. Maybe sacrifice a little bit of detail here and there. I've already touched on that. But it's actually a very important thing to sacrifice the odd bit of detail or get an older version if it means spending a little less money. You already know what this next tip is, so I'm not even going to say it. But in all seriousness, this is probably the most obvious tip of all. get the 501st Battle Pack. So this is especially good if you want a 501st army, which pretty much everyone does, and it's just really, it's one of the cheapest way to get clone troopers that have a lot of detail and are really popular from the TV show. Plus you get a couple battle droids and some great vehicles to use or part out as you wish. And yeah, just get as many of these as you possibly can. Maybe even wait for them to go on sale a little bit later. But yeah, getting lots of these, this will help you grow your army. But it's only really good if you want the 501st troopers. If you want other types of clone troopers, just look at my previous tips. So now let's look at a couple of things that you shouldn't do when buying clone troopers. The first one is buying old sets for them. Like, you all know about the popular battle packs like the 2009 clone battle pack, the 2014 legendary battle packs, in which this guy came, or in which this guy came, or stuff like that. You should not try and get those sets. It will ruin your wallet. These sets go upwards of like $50. Like the absolute cheapest I found of the Autopod Troopers Battle Pack used, complete with figures, was 51 Canadian dollars. So it's probably a little bit cheaper for these guys because they're a little less desirable, but still, it really is a bad idea to go out buying sets just for the clone troopers they contain. If you happen to buy a set that you want anyways and it happens to have clone troopers in it, or if it's readily available and in stores, then you can buy the set. But except for that, I really wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, another example is the 2009 Clone Battle Pack in which these guys came. They go for upwards of $35 plus for the minifigures. Yeah, these guys, their battle pack is a little bit cheaper, but it's still not a very good idea because all you're getting in addition is a build, maybe instructions, maybe a box. Who knows? Sometimes they don't even have that. So yeah, buying sets for figures is not a really good idea. So another thing you should not do when buying a clone trooper army is drawing on clone troopers. This is a rule that I have broken multiple times on my own clone troopers, as shown by ARF Trooper Hardy. See those dots there? I added those myself. And then Captain Rex. If you do draw on these troopers, these markings in some way, shape, or form will be permanent and they will not come off for a very long time or at a significant expense, so it is not worth the risk. Of course, the reason I did Captain Rex is because Clone Army custom shipping is expensive, but that leads us to one last tip. My last tip is buy Clone Army Customs helmets to go with figures, or buy from Clone Army Customs in general. So, especially for rarer figures like Phase 2 Rex, Phase 2 Cody, if you want figures that LEGO doesn't make, especially, Clone Army Customs is a really good way to get these helmets or figures for a decent price. The figures can get expensive, especially if you're not in the United States of America, but the helmets, they're not too bad, especially for guys like, as I said, Phase 2 Rex, or Phase 2 Cody, or the 332nd Trooper even. Like, these helmets are pretty rare and expensive on Bricklink, so getting the Clone Army Customs one, which not only is more accurate, but it is usually cheaper in some cases, it can save you a little bit of money here and there. But still get the torsos off Bricklink, because Clone Army Customs doesn't sell torsos. And yeah. So, this has been my video on how to build a Clone Trooper army without breaking the bank. So, thanks for watching this video, guys. Comment if you found this helpful in the comments below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.